Jack McDonald was a legend. Jack was a figure who took fundamental investing and produced generations of leading investors.
In Jack's 50 years at Stanford, he was the preeminent professor of equity investing in the country.
The Graduate School of Business was founded in 1925. I taught here before retirement 42 years. Jack taught an astounding 50 years. Nobody had ever reached that level of attainment, and I don't think anybody ever will.
I think he probably was the most influential teacher in my history of going to school.
He said to us, this course is going to change the way you look at the world. It's going to change your life.
There's always people that you have as models that you would like to emulate. Jack was obviously one of the top of the list with me.
Even in high school, he was #1 in his class. He was a National Merit Scholar. He was president of the student body. And he always cared about people. And I think he got that very much from his incredible parents.
Jack and I first met when we were about 19 years of age. He was Stanford. I was at Stanford. He was from Stockton, California. I was from Woodland, California.
We've gone through a real evolution. So over that 40 years, I think about it, he was an admired teacher. Then he became a respected mentor. Then he became a trusted colleague and ended up a dear friend.
He taught investments from the standpoint of the company, investing in a company, as opposed to teaching what became very popular over the years, namely modern portfolio theory.
Jack invited Warren Buffett to come be a guest in his class. And I think it was very complimentary to the things that Jack was teaching. It was also dazzling to the students.
I started in the 70s, and every time he invited me, I came. So I just feel very lucky to have had him as a friend for 45 years.
He was still based in the fundamentals. He was a student of companies. He was a student and believer in management teams.
He was very strong in his beliefs, and the whole finance industry was moving toward efficient markets and quantitative analysis, and he held on to his guns on fundamental analysis. And if you work hard and you're really smart, you can do better than everyone else. And I'd say based on how his students have done over the years, he was right.
Jack, of course, was a brilliant classroom teacher. But more than that, in any time you had a talk with him, you learned something.
He taught with such great energy and such enthusiasm that he would cover 3 chalkboards with all the notes that he was writing down for us.
Many people think of investing as numbers and spreadsheets, but Jack really saw it as an art. And he was a practitioner as an artisan and as a craftsman.
Being with Jack, you just kind of fall in love with investments because he made it real. He had examples, real life examples, case studies, but he had so much background.
You wrote dozens and dozens of cases exploring what you call the oral tradition of investing, wisdom that cannot be found in textbooks. Your case materials are 100% custom made, all developed by you.
I think maybe Jack was the first person who did what's now known as the flipped classroom. He flipped it from being about the sage on the stage to being about that alchemy of professor, speaker, and student.
In the fall of 1980, Jack brought into our classroom the 25-year-old Steve Jobs, founder of Apple, to help our class with our job that day, which was to put a price on Apple's IPO.
He had a magical way of getting people excited about the topic and then sort of leading them very, very gently down a path of exploration where they could figure something out.
I was blessed to have the opportunity to annually present to his class. It was always one of the high points of each year.
When he arrived at the GSB, there was virtually no knowledge of practitioners in the investment business, and he brought those practitioners into the classroom, into our lives, and changed them forever.
It was really about their character, their attributes, who they were as individuals.
Morgan Stanley, where I was working at the time, was in the process of taking Bridge Communications public. Jack and I wrote a case together in 1985, and we taught it together for 33 straight years.
There were people who knew years before they even applied that they wanted to come to the Stanford Graduate School of Business and they wanted to take Jack's class.
When you chose to take his class, he took that decision very seriously. He felt like, okay, you've made a choice to spend time with me. I'm going to make a choice to spend time with you.
He always came up and had a very warm smile with a really long handshake, and it just made you feel like you were the most important human on the planet.
We had 100 points total, and you had to take those 100 points and bid them over your entire class schedule. So the clearing price for Jack's class was in the mid-80s. So you had to bid 85 to get into Jack's class, and then you had 15 for the entire rest of your schedule.
I run into students regularly who the first thing I ask them is if they went to Stanford, and if they tell me they did. I said, did you have Jack's class? And they used up all their points or whatever it was to get it.
There are students that use all of their points to try to get into Jack's class and still didn't get in.
Jack introduced me to something, investing, which turned out to be a great fit for me. So I guess one of the big lessons is, do things that are a good fit and that you have passion for.
I learned and watched a man who was having fun every day at what he did. And I knew that I'd be so much better at anything I did if it was fun every day.
Jack represented integrity. And I think that integrity, whether it's in the business, in the market, or in the vast area you're serving, was something that was important to Jack.
I certainly learned from Jack, that be interested in other people, and you'll be interesting.
I remember so distinctly that last session when we had our 50th year closing session celebration. And when I went up to him, he said, Michael, I'm so proud of you. And what I want you to remember is that it doesn't matter what happens at graduation. It doesn't matter what these grades are, right? It matters how good of a person you are and what you do for others.
He made sure to remind all these really eager, hardworking, hard-driving second-year business school students that one of the most important things you can do is have an outside passion. He just said, make sure you dedicate a lot of time, enough time, to those things that you really love while you're doing this other thing we call investing.
We met on the first tee at Stanford. He loved his golf.
If you spent a lot of time with him, family would always come up. His boys, how important his boys were to him, how he loved his boys, Melody. Even the way he said her name made her sound special.
When we got married, I felt she was a great pianist and a great young woman. I've since learned that she's an angel.
I feel so blessed that I had 45 years of a very happy marriage with him.
Melody and Jack were an incredibly dynamic couple, and they came from different perspectives, and I think that the combination of the two of them was unmatched out there in the world.
He had this kind of, I want to help you gene. Whenever he thought he could do something or somebody was, in need, he would kind of pick up on that and immediately try to help them.
He couldn't have been more helpful in talking to me about teaching, about preparing cases, about guiding case discussion in class.
He derived tremendous satisfaction from the success of his students.
Jack was very proud of his own military service and how it had shaped him. And he made all of us who came from the military to his class not just feel welcome, but actually feel a little special.
I decided to leave the firm I was working with and start my own hedge fund. Jack reached out immediately and said, I want to hear about it. I explained the investment mandate and our business plans, which was somewhat unusual for a hedge fund at the time. And he said, Andreas, I'm in. I want to be your LP number 001.
I remember calling him when I was about a year and a half outside of business school, and I was trying to make the decision, should I in fact leave my much-loved job at Bain & Company, where I was quite comfortable and life was good, to what at the time felt like take a big risk, which was to join a relatively small and unknown private equity firm. It was Jack's wisdom, to sit me down and say, at 27, I think it's not too big a risk. And I'm so glad he gave me that nudge.
One of the nicest things Jack did for me was recommend me for the position of CEO at the Stanford Management Company. That's just one small thing that Jack did for many, many of his students over the years. He introduced us to employment opportunities. He introduced us to potential partners.
Jack always wanted to give everybody else the credit. He was very humble, and he had a lot of wisdom. But half the time he made you think that you thought it after he told you what it was.
I would have some issue that I was dealing with, and I would present it to him, and I'd walk away and I'd think, I've talked to 3 or 4 people about this, but Jack's insight really was an insight not only into the issue, but into me.
We had an event to dedicate Highland Hall, and which was a very special day for Jack. Many of his students came. After the dinner ended, his students got up one by one and they talked about the impact that Jack had had on their lives. Every single one of these students, by the time they finished speaking, there were tears in their eyes.
He's influenced 10,000 students for sure. There's a magnification beyond that. Just thousands of people have been influenced by Jack and his compassion and his intellect.
The sense of sort of history in the making, that somebody could have a 50-year run at teaching the same topic to people who infiltrate finance around the world with the message that he left them is really his legacy.
I really do not believe it's an overstatement to say he reshaped the entire alternative investment industry, both private equity firms and hedge funds.
He was an extremely important contributor to the phenomenal growth and recognition of the school.
I've tried to convince people to calculate in monetary terms the impact of what Jack and the students who've come through his class have done for the world in terms of the value that has been created. And my guess is it's not in the billions of dollars, it's in the trillions of dollars. It's just a gigantic impact.
Jack would like to be remembered as somebody who unselfishly tried to create, what he always described as the next generation of investors.
I said to him, now, what would you like me to say about you? And he said, well, first, you have to tell them how much I loved teaching. I really loved teaching. And then you have to tell them how much I loved the students. I loved my students. And third, you have to tell them how much I loved Stanford.
Well, thanks, and all the best to all of you.